First off, I love my kids.
This is Learning to Dad.
I'm the cool dad. That's my thing.
With Tyler Ross.
What I do have are a very particular set of skills.
I'm gonna have fun, and you're gonna have fun.
All right, this is Learning to Dad. I am Tyler Ross. My guest today is Matt Carson. Matt is an author, former candidate for the Virginia delegate. He was arrested at West Virginia University, where he gained some notoriety for publicly busting up the then school president for his anti-keg and anti-partying rules. He was featured alongside Cooter from Dukes of Hazzard in the Men of Rappahannock partially nude calendar that was put together to raise money for the county school athletic program. He's a founder of Big Teams, a web development company for high school athletic programs, founder of Carson and Machete, a custom blazer company, founder of SiteWorks, a web and software development company, on the board of the Middleburg Film Festival, and one of my personal favorites, he's the co-founder of Outsider Labs, a think tank with multiple projects going on, including riothouse.com, a site that hosts debates ranging from politics and sports to health and entertainment, and even a line of cocoon jewelry. An entrepreneur in the true sense, Matt Carson. You're a pretty interesting fucking guy.
Well, thank you very much. That was the best intro I've ever heard. Sounds like I'm doing something.
I think you might be doing a thing or two. And I also left out that you're the co-founder of 2 children.
Yes.
And your husband. I appreciate you having me here in your office in Warrenton. The point of being here is really taking somebody like yourself, someone that I perceive to be, a high achiever, somebody with a willingness to put yourself out there, somebody that's an entrepreneur, and trying to couple that with what it's like to be a parent and how those things cross-pollinate each other. And I just wanted to talk fatherhood with you and parenting. So the first thing that I'll ask you just to get started, you just got back from a huge family road trip. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, we took 3 weeks. I took 3 weeks off work for the first time in my life to take that much time off consecutively. And we drove out west and stayed at 11 national parks, 24 days on the road, 7,000 miles. And I wanted to do it for several reasons. One is to show the kids just how big this country is.
Yeah.
And how different it is. And they quickly grasped that concept that virtually every day it looks like a different planet. You go from Yellowstone to Arches to Moab. These places are just so different than Virginia or Florida or pretty much anything on the East Coast. And plus just the experience of appreciating the national parks, the natural beauty. We banned iPads or technology for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And just had an incredible time.
Yeah, and so to contrast that with any other vacation that you've gone on, was this the most kind of in-depth, kind of personal growth type of vacation versus anything else?
That's a good point. It absolutely was. For me and the kids. I've driven cross-country several times in my 20s, and when you do something with your kids, you are almost doing it all over again.
Yeah.
Because I've seen Old Faithful, I've seen the Rockies many times,
Yeah.
You do it with kids, they are just blown away. I mean, to them it's, magical.
Yeah.
So you're re-experiencing that. And then the other big thing, I told them ahead of the trip, I said there's only 2 rules. 1 is no whining, and 2 is if you tell me you're bored, I'm going to say good. Because being bored is good for your brain.
Yeah.
It forces you to just, let your mind wander.
Mm-hmm.
So I was trying to really get that concept across to them.
Yeah.
That, when you're in a car for 8 hours through Kansas.
Flat.
You are going to be bored.
Yeah.
And that is good for your brain. It's brain food in a way.
So did you see them kind of evolve and change over the course of that 3 weeks and all of those experiences, and their desire to have the iPads or their desire to not be bored or to be constantly stimulated? Did you perceive some kind of meditative overlay or anything in them as you were on that trip?
I absolutely did. After day 2, they quit talking about iPads
In 2 days.
in just 2 days. I got them just blank notepads with pens.
Yeah.
So if you're bored, you can draw, sketch, doodle, journal, whatever you want to do. And they quickly adapted to getting enjoyment out of that.
Yeah.
The thing that made me really proud was we didn't stay in a hotel that many nights. Most nights we were camping. The nights we were in a hotel, they complained that they weren't camping.
No kidding.
So I said, okay, I've done my job.
So compare that to kind of the lifestyle you live on a day-to-day basis. You live in the country, right? And, have some acreage. And, I mean, do the kids spend much time outside as it is now? Well, first, how old are your kids?
My daughter's 11 and my son is 7.
Okay, so they're in a generation that's seeking screen time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you try to pare that down at home? And what do you do to do that if you do?
Yeah, I treat the iPads like a TV.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, we could only have so much TV time.
Yeah.
I do the same with an iPad. I think it's good. There's good things that come from the iPad, but we don't need to be on it all the time. I would rather them. This is a funny husband-wife discussion, but I'm in favor of stitches and bruises and cuts and the occasional broken bone.
Probably have a couple yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's weird to say you're in favor of that, but the way you get those is because you're living a little bit dangerously. You're climbing trees. You're running across rocks. You know what I mean? I think it's a natural tendency, especially for my wife and most wives, from what I understand, to say, be careful.
Yeah.
Whoa, you're running too fast, down the whatever. I do the opposite.
Yeah.
Unless they're trying to wrestle an alligator, I stay out of it.
Yeah.
And I think a couple of things. One is it teaches that pain isn't the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're going to get cut up. Like I told someone, pain's supposed to hurt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it eventually goes away, and I think you become a little better for it each time you. But at the same time, I don't want to raise children that are skittish and afraid of challenging themselves physically and professionally.
And so to create some context here, we live in Fauquier County, Virginia. You live in Culpeper County?
Right on the border of Fauquier, Culpeper.
And so we live right in town. We live on basically a postage stamp lot, and I'm desperately trying to get my family out on at least more land, if not further into the country. Do you feel like that's an advantage to your kids to be grown up in the country versus being in the town of Warrenton or in even a big city like New York or DC or anywhere else?
Yeah, I think there's advantages to all of them and disadvantages too. We live on the Hazel River, and you can't see neighbors from our house, and there's a lot of natural trouble to get into. I mean that in a good way. But one downside is you don't have neighbors. And for kids, meeting on the street, playing basketball with the neighbor, we don't have that.
Yeah.
So there's advantages and disadvantages to both. Like in order for kids to come over, you have to arrange that.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be planned because you got to drive, all the way out.
So did you grow up in the same way that they're growing up now? Do you think that influenced your decision to create an environment in which they grew up, that you were content with the way you did it or discontent and created a life kind of based on your experience?
Probably. Yeah, that is how I grew up for the most part. We had a creek, getting muddy, climbing trees. I mean, growing up in the 80s and previous generations, our parents didn't have to battle with Snapchat and Musical.ly and iPads. Atari got boring after a while. So, we naturally were, I think, physical because you had to be, to play outside, play with friends. You were doing that stuff. So I really want that and also just a relationship with nature.
Yeah.
I don't want them to fear nature. I want them to, enjoy it and be comfortable with it and all the things I enjoy, fishing, floating.
So for me, nature is kind of a place where I kind of get grounded again and kind of unwind all of the, wrapping around the axle that the day-to-day grind can create. And do you kind of see your kids react that way in nature as well? Like coming from school, I mean, at 7 and 11, it's hard to think of them having real problems, but they have true emotions and they have true relationships and things that are very, very real, do you think that retreat back from school or, events enhances their well-being?
I think it does. Yeah, having that outlet. I put in trails through the woods. They have a tree house. I think it does. Plus, I got them every nature book imaginable with bug, bird identification, all that stuff, picture books, because I want them to appreciate, these things.
Do you see a contrast with your kids and your kids' friends that grow up in a more kind of urban environment and the way they, either behave or treat other people or the issues that concern them as kids?
Absolutely. I mean, one example recently is we have I got the kids a hatchet.
Yeah.
And, I showed them how to use it, and I let them, my one rule was, the obvious one, you don't use it on other people or even pretend. I think I checked that one off the list. But and then number 2 was don't use it on live trees. They know what a dead tree is. Using on dead trees go nuts.
That's
and
part
they
of the
go
respect
crazy.
for nature.
Yeah, there's parts of the woods I can show you where there's not a branch that's 4 feet and lower that exists. They literally just clear. I couldn't believe how much labor they put into this. Like you can look right through the woods. Well, we had a family come out, and they live in Fairfax, and Clayton, I overheard him yell to the other kid, "Let's go get the hatchet." Well, the mom freaked out. He may have said gun the way she reacted. Yeah. And I just calmly said, I can show them how to use it if you want. They're not going to. No, my God, that was the worst. Well, Clayton's backup to the hatchet is he has a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, of
that
course.
they whittle with. Whittle. And then that was just as bad. So I realized, okay, these are, you do start to see the differences.
Yeah, absolutely. To speak about the balance between, nature and the city, I'll flip into kind of balance between work and life, because that's part of the goal of the conversation is to, there's no real metric by which a father can measure their effectiveness as they're doing it. I mean, the result is you have a kid that's not an axe murderer. They don't take that hatchet and bury it into somebody else.
Like Chris Rock said, if you can keep your daughter off the pole,
yeah, exactly.
You're a good dad.
You're a good dad, but you don't know until the pole's been put there and they say, no, thanks, I don't want to be on the pole. So let's kind of start kind of at the beginning. Where were you when you had your first kid in your professional life? And how did that, balance? We talked about how we had no responsibilities and we could spend our money like it was our money and buy things just for us. And now that has flipped to where we have other mouths to feed and people to take care of and people we care about. But when you had your first kid 11 years ago, where were you in your professional life? And can you talk a little bit about how your perception of what was about to change and what actually changed and, the impact that a kid had on your work-life balance?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Emma was born, I had Siteworks, big teams, and a bunch of other experimental projects. And the initial big change was I still work late. I work till 2 a.m. I just always naturally have. That's when I'm most active is at night.
You a late riser?
Yeah. I get up late and stay up late. And what used to happen before kids was we would do that at the office.
Mm-hmm.
After the phone stopped ringing, we would grab a beer, some bourbon, and stay up late and whiteboard. And when myself and other partners had kids, that ended.
Yeah.
That was the most abrupt change. That late night, whiteboarding, collaboration, a little tipsy.
Yep.
The free flow of that ended. Then big teams got funded. The guys who own the DC sports teams invested in big teams, and we moved that office to Tyson's. And I really, because now we've hired more people, we purchased another company, I really wanted those late night, not every night, but some, you got to have those. Well, then it became, all right, let's get a hotel.
Yeah.
And Tyson's. Got to let the wife know, the kids know, sports, all the logistics that go into that. It becomes more difficult. It becomes a scheduled thing, and that kind of loses the impromptu, So that's a big one. So then you find yourself just brainstorming by yourself.
Yeah.
At night,
For better or worse.
You know what I mean? And I wouldn't exactly call that a storm.
Yeah, you bouncing ideas off your wife now in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
Hey, I got
exactly,
one. I got one. Well, so did you see that change coming, or was it a total shock as a new father? You go from this improvisation to the scheduled collaboration, and
Yeah, that was abrupt.
Yeah,
I didn't see it coming.
Yeah,
I didn't think of that. Before you have a child, you try to think of everything. The room, the right bed.
Yeah.
Your wife's doing the research on the right stuff and all that. But yeah, that part I didn't see coming.
So, So it sounds like the improvisation or the ability to be a little bit more freewheeling prior to a kid, and then having a kid kind of leads to maybe routines. Do you find what are any pros or cons associated with new routines and scheduling things versus being more kind of seat of your pants, professionally or familially?
Yeah, I think I've noticed I've become more efficient, and that's out of force.
Yeah.
And because there is no alternative.
Right.
You either become absentee
Mm-hmm.
or you become more efficient in your work.
So are there any particular efficiencies that you've kind of put into practice since being a parent that has proved particularly effective for you that another parent might say, hey, I can apply that to my life. I'm about to have a kid. Now that, Matt's shared this with me and others, I hear, that my life is going to be less kind of fluid and more rigid.
Mm-hmm.
Like any ideas that you can share that have kind of hacked your efficiencies?
One big one is communication. So it used to be that I would reply to emails all day, all night,
Mm-hmm.
and write emails all day and all night. Now what I've done is I have I use OneNote, Microsoft OneNote, on my phone and my computer. It all syncs. And as I think of things, I can also paste images into it. So I'll use that as my notepad anytime. As far as email goes, I reply to emails twice a day.
They call that batching, right?
Batching.
Yeah.
In the morning and in the evening. And that's it.
And you don't find any change in as far as people's expectation of you?
I absolutely have.
Yeah.
But
for better or worse?
they can deal with it.
Yeah. You got to have some peace.
Yeah. And people are going to get used to it. Yeah, they're forced to get used to it.
How long have you been practicing that?
Quite a while. Now, there are breaks in the rule.
Sure.
Obvious. Certain things you just have to force
Yeah.
to happen.
I'm trying to put batching in my phone calls and my emails to effect. I'm finding it a difficult thing to acclimate myself to because I'm so used to just responding on the fly all the time, always having your phone, always having your computer.
Yeah.
But you can waste an entire day just staring at your inbox and
Exactly.
getting pinged and pinging back.
And and when you don't have kids and you have all the time in the world, you're not dividing your time, then that is an option. I think afterwards you start to, like we talked about, you have to become more efficient. And I think also you become you and this also comes with age. I think it's a mixture of age and experience, and having kids is you become more efficient with your decision making, more efficient with your tasks, and better at deciding what ideas to chase and which one to let fall away.
Yeah, definitely. Do you find that kind of spilling over with your kids to some extent, like creating efficiencies with your relationships with them, routines or habits that have formed based around your home schedule and your work schedule and creating balance, and like you find that you have kind of these set in stone things that always get done at always the same time?
I don't with the kids, and I have to constantly force myself to say yes.
To your kids?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. Like the other night, I taught them chess.
Yeah.
And so, Clayton wants to play chess. Great. Yes, that's an easy yes. Done.
Mm-hmm.
The third game he wants to play, you're like, in a row. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, now, granted, games of chess with a kid don't take that long.
Yeah,
but
7-year-old.
You know,
You're not one of the parents that lets your kid win.
no, I do not let them win at anything. And so by the third game, you're like, okay, I got some things to do. So you're kind of forcing your brain to say, shut up.
Yeah.
Really? What's another 30 minutes?
Yeah.
You know?
It means so much to the kids.
Yeah. And they're getting better each time. And, so that, or throwing the baseball. I love throwing the baseball with them, playing basketball with them, whatever. But after a while, that part of your brain kind of automatically kicks in and says, okay, we got stuff to do.
So what do you do to keep that in check? Like, do you have any, do you meditate, or do you have any, kind of mantras you say to yourself, or anything that kind of helps you shut your brain off to its desire to just kind of spin out of control so you can be more present with your kids?
I have tried meditation 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
On my bookshelf, I probably have 30 books on meditation. I've downloaded podcasts on it. I've gone to gurus and sat down and done.
Really? Yeah.
I just believe that, and the pros would disagree with me because meditation should work for. I don't think it's for me. I don't, and it's not from a lack of trying. I think what works for me is literally just brute force.
Yeah.
Just brute force that when, you have a thought that your brain's chasing, you just brute force say, shut up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or if I'm playing with the kids and 50% of you after, the second hour is still really enjoying it and the other 50% says, hey, we got stuff to do, you just shut it up.
Yeah.
Shut up.
That
We'll get to
almost sounds like its own form of meditation.
It might be. It may be, but that's the only thing that works for me is just brute force. Yeah.
That's funny. You've got, going back into routines, do you have routines with your kids? Like when they brush their teeth every night or first thing in the morning, you wake up and they wake up and you guys watch Sports Center together, or anything that is kind of frequently happening? No,
I'm not a routine guy.
Yeah?
My wife is. She's big on routine and the importance of routine with kids, but no, I'm more of a by the seat of your pants type.
So it sounds like you've managed to maintain that seat of your pants kind of approach, despite the impact having kids does, but in the same breath you've enacted a couple of, I'll call them hacks to try to create some efficiencies now that you have, less time available to apply to your work. So I'll flip right back to this question here. Is there anything, particularly silly that you do with your kids? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we all do the wrestle with them. I kind of flow with their imagination. You know what I mean? When they come up with a game, or you're walking in the woods, they'll pretend they spotted an animal, and you get them to describe it to you. Then I'll get them to draw it, and then you get wrapped up in that, and you almost remember what a real imagination was like. Pablo Picasso said, "We're all born artists. We just forget how." Yeah.
And I firmly believe that that's the truth. So that's another thing having kids do. You got to re-see the world through their eyes, which we still have somewhere in our brain. It's just been beaten out of us through, kind of the institution of the world. But that's one. And then the other thing you reminded me of that's really had a big effect is I've started involving them in things I'm doing. And it hit me when they were talking to me about what their friends' dads do.
Yeah.
Okay? And they literally looked at me and said, "What do you do?" I was like, oh, wow. Because, they see all these they'll see me in the basement experimenting with fabrics one time, and then next time, I'll be
packing a bag of human food.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like there's no rhyme or reason to it. And I know in their heads they're probably at some point going to say, how does this possibly make money?
Well, you wonder where their imagination comes from. You're creative and you're coming up with different things, and they're two different things, creativity and imagination maybe, but one kind of falling inside the box of what humanity might accept, and the other being what hasn't been beaten out of our children through the socialization into our kind of mediocre humanity. But as far as the imagination and participating with that in your kids, is that something you're still actively allowing yourself to do, or is that something that came naturally, or is that something you have to consciously be aware of and, tell your brain, shut up, I'm doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I have to consciously be aware of it. Like if I'm working on a project, and if it's not interesting to them, it's not. I don't force it, but I'll let them in on what's going on, like with the Blazer project. And then they start asking questions. Where'd you get the fabric? And I walk them through that.
Yeah.
And in one hand, you start to realize it takes some of the mystery out of the world to them. And at the same time, it kind of reteaches you. Like, when you try to give a child a lesson, like, don't be an asshole.
Yeah, yeah.
Part of you's reminding yourself, don't be an asshole.
I find that to be 100% true.
You know what I mean? So it's like when they have a question about something, how's that made? How does that work? You're almost reminding yourself. And a lot of times you have to go back and do research. I have no problem telling them I don't know.
Yeah.
That's one of the great things about the internet our parents didn't have was I can go look up, how is plastic made?
Yeah.
Where does plastic come from? Well, damn, I should have asked that question 100 times over the past 40 years. I never did.
Yeah,
Let's
you
look
didn't
it up.
have YouTube to look it up.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an opportunity to talk about your upbringing. Like were you that creative, imaginary, kid growing up?
Absolutely. One example is our parents took us to California, and we, did the redwood forest and all that. Well, they went to a winery. And I remember falling in love with this winery because they took us on a tour, and I was 12 years old, and they're showing you how wine is made.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is really cool. So I went home and saved my money and told my mom I want to go buy a winemaking kit, these things for home. I'm 12 years old.
Yeah.
She drove me to the store in Fairfax, and with my money, I bought this kit, bought the juice, and I made wine in the basement, and I made my own labels for it. And then they had people over and they tried the wine. Now, she later admitted it was god awful.
Sure.
But at the time, they're like, wow, this is,
Your
whatever.
parents rolled with it and were
Yeah, they rolled
supportive
with
of it. And
I think back on that example and others all the time that it's an easy reaction as a parent
yeah.
to say no. It's almost like the first thing, like when a kid has to do no. But if I stop, which is, again, this is brute force,
Mm-hmm.
and then just say, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
What do you think it is that you could share about your ability to do that, to be mindful enough to, however you do it, to shut it down? Because like you said, you've read tons of books and watched videos and even seen gurus, and you've decided that the way that's best for you is just brute force. That had to be an experience to get to that point, to actually be conscious enough to know that it is brute force that works for me. And can you elaborate on that a little bit? Is there anything that you could suggest that a parent do that's struggling with, shutting off their monkey mind so that they can be more present with their kids?
Yeah, I live by the mantra of, in terms of professional, in terms of business, of why not? Let's try it.
Yeah.
So try to apply that to my personal life, which is just taking a beat before you say something.
Mm-hmm. That takes discipline.
Yeah, in your relationship, particularly with your kids and your wife and friends. Because you start to realize at some point that everything, you talk about routine, that your life becomes a routine.
Mm-hmm.
Get up, take a shower, get your coffee, go to work, come home, do X, whatever, have dinner, watch TV, go to bed.
Yeah.
Do it all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So to break that up with whatever it is, I heard a talk one time where a guy said he devoted, his first project was to read a book a month.
Yeah.
Okay. Then the second year, he wanted to learn a new skill a year. So he continued to read a book a month, but he added on a new skill a year. So his first one was harmonica or whatever. And I came away from that like, wow, that's so simple, but what a difference it makes.
Yeah.
So I've always been a reader, but there was no, I don't want to say you have to put discipline behind it and make a schedule and a calendar. It's just try.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? This isn't exactly answering your question, but it's becoming more conscious of what you do day by day, week by week.
Yeah.
And I think as a parent, having kids, that you run across a baby picture every now and then. You're like, damn. And what does every grandparent tell you? Life goes by fast. You're going to turn around one day, and they're going to be adults, and you're going to be an old man.
Yeah.
You hear that over and over. I don't think it starts to sink in for a while. You almost have to say it to yourself to say, you know, it's one question, what do I want to get out of life? But it's another question to say, what do I need to do to shake things up?
Yeah.
Because otherwise, this routine I'm going to keep doing, I'm going to turn around, I'm 65 years old, 75 years old, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Jesse Itzler from Marquee Jets, and he talks about his life resume all the time. An interesting person to listen to.
Yeah, Living with a Seal.
Yeah, exactly. David Goggins.
Yeah.
Awesome dude. But he talks about a routine constantly, and then how routine is great, but it can become a rut. Yeah. And so you have to bust up that routine every now and again so that you feel like you can slow time down, because having a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, I feel like every time I blink, I'm time traveling to seeing my kid that much older than I did when I blinked last time. And it's a wild experience to watch, and I'm trying to come up with ways to slow it down. That's part of what's motivated me to, have a conversation like this. So to continue on, how would you say your parenting style might be different than maybe your wife's? How do they compare and contrast, where you're slowing everything down and saying yes to everything, and go hurt yourself, go bruise yourself, learn from experience and these things, and how do they complement each other, and how are they kind of at odds?
Yeah, other than the example, the natural, want to say slow down, hold on, don't do that, you'll hurt yourself. We're pretty similar in the on the other side. Mm-hmm. Like the last minute, hey, it's Friday, let's go camping. Yeah. Type the other side, we're pretty similar, thankfully, that the why not attitude. Mm-hmm. Driving cross country for 3 weeks kind of solidified that.
Did you kind of grow that together, or were you kind of already that way and that's what drew you to this life in the first place?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're both a little bit wild.
Yeah.
so it works out in that respect.
Yeah, so being a little wild, do you see you or your kids' moms in your kids? Like, what kind of qualities do you see that you have, that your kids have, that you like, or feel like you got to kind of work out of them because they didn't treat you right, or they did treat you right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And on one hand, it scares the hell out of you. I took them down to an alligator facility in Florida, and they're literally 12, 14-foot alligators that they're feeding chickens to. Yeah, down there. And Clayton immediately asked, "How do I get down there?" Right?
Right.
And I said, no. We stand here behind this fence and watch it. He got mad. I mean, really mad at me. Yeah. And it occurred to me that this whole time I'm talking up this, all day. We're going to go see these alligators. He's like, sweet, let's go. You know what I mean? So there's part of him where you see yourself like, oh, shit. Yeah. We're in for a world of adventure with this one.
So your perspective of yourself so far has kind of been, you're an enabler, say yes, let's do this, let's work on it together. Do you think if you asked your kids the same question that they would say, oh man, Dad is all about doing whatever we want to do because we want to experiment and go do it and try it? Or would they say he's a total buzzkill?
That's a great question. I'm going to try that. That's a great question. I think it depends on the day. You know how kids are, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, no, he doesn't let us do anything. And then another day it'd be like, no, it's awesome.
It's a great opportunity to ask you about punishment. There's certainly times that they did something that you would have done that that you got punished for. And can you talk about maybe the way that you were punished by your parents for doing something, and if you were punished at all, and the way that might have influenced how you punish your kids, if punish is even the right word? Maybe it's teach them something versus punishing them?
Yeah, what I try to do is the kind of try that again thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, lesson 1 in life: don't be an asshole.
Mm-hmm.
Life becomes a lot easier if you're not an asshole. But when they're being an asshole, then I try the, hey, let's try that again, buddy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That doesn't work.
Yeah.
I try that. And then the easy go-to is you take things away.
Yeah.
Every parent does.
Yeah.
You take things away, But then some kids are just tough, and that doesn't have an effect,
You embarrassed by anything you've tried to do to punish your kids?
Oh, wow, that's a good one. Embarrassed. I'll have to think on that one.
Or like wish you hadn't done it, or...
Yeah, actually, yeah. So, when you pull your car in a parking lot and the kids just swing the doors open.
Yeah.
And you try to look, there's a car, whatever. Clayton just was mad and swung the door open and nailed another car.
Yeah.
And I instantly reacted. There was no thought behind it.
Yeah, no
I
beat that
instantly
you
yelled.
talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I really yelled,
Yeah.
And then he starts tearing up, and then you're like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
So I just had to talk with him, like, look, buddy, I'm sorry. That was just a reaction, but I've told you 100 times, like, just now you see what happened. There's a dent in this car, so I write a note and put it on the windshield wiper.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dude called like 2 days later.
Yeah.
And Clayton was there, thankfully, so he heard the my side of the conversation. And the dude was cool. He's like, man, it's an old truck. I'm not worried about it. Thanks for the note. But anyway, it's like a moment like that you do want to show the kids you do the right thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the reaction was bad. I think everyone does that at times, and you just have to kind of remind yourself, like, chill out. They did not do that on purpose.
Yeah.
They're a kid.
Yeah. So it kind of comes down to that a lot. It's like, bite your tongue. They're a kid. But they're capable of so much more than we give them credit for, I think. I find a lot of what I do is convincing myself to just get out of the way and let them do stuff. But to stay on that topic, do you have any like vivid memories of being punished yourself? Like anything that impacted you as a kid that your parents did that you went, wow, I was really out of line and I can't believe they behaved that way, or you had a regular reaction to the way that they tried to discipline you or, kind of control your behavior?
Yeah, other than, the standard wait till your dad gets home, which that is kind of the worst, I think, because then you're mulling it over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not that when dad gets home, anything awful happens, but that time period in between that moment, it's like, oh, shit.
enough to dissuade you to do it again.
Exactly. Yeah. Those words are like, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. So what are some...
Real quick, on the flip side,
Yeah.
Heather called me not too long ago. I can't even remember what Clayton did, but she said, I told him, wait till your dad comes home. Right? So then now I'm on the other side of this, and I'm like, well, shit.
What am I supposed to do?
Whatever she said didn't even sound that bad to me. But it's like, well, damn. Now the pressure's on me to perform.
Sometimes you have to like conjure anger or a reason to discipline your kids because you're looking at your wife going, I have no problem with this. What they did was just fine.
Yeah.
I don't care that they dumped out all the flour into the dishwasher, whatever.
And then you're going through all this because you're like, well, if I don't say something, then that wait till your dad gets home is going to have no meaning next time. Because it'll be like, well, dad got home and nothing happened. Yeah, it's funny being on the other side of that.
Oh, gosh. So disciplining your kid, I feel like the intent behind it is to, kind of direct their behavior. To make them a decent human. Don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
So, like, what do you feel like is your role as a dad to shape that? Like, how do you shape that? And, what do you do as a father to help prepare your kids for life so that they're not shocked by it when they enter the world economy or the job market or relationships with somebody that they love or fall out of love with, or friends that, their friendships go sideways. Like how do you teach your kids to, how do you prepare your kids for life?
Yeah, that's a great one.
What's your approach?
I think one that will constantly wrestle with and fine tune for probably the rest of our lives. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As those questions evolve and they get older, this is cliche, but the one is by example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's another great thing having kids does to you, is you realize that there's another little human watching how you not only treat the world but move around it,
Yeah.
and treat other people,
Mm-hmm.
which has a very positive effect on you in a lot of ways. Just from overreacting in traffic,
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of
Road
stop doing
rage.
that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because there's little people in the back seat watching how you interact with the world.
Absolutely.
You kind of take a beat on things, and that's what I try to teach them, is just take a breath and think about how you want to react. Or then the other thing is, I've gotten in the habit of, every now and then we'll have a movie night, and I'll bring out an old movie,
Mm-hmm.
E.T., Goonies,
Yeah.
Field of Dreams. And it occurred to me that a lot of the movies we grew up with were really incredible. Now that you're rewatching them with the kids, in the ways that, the kids are super independent in these movies.
Right.
You think about E.T.,
Yeah.
the kids are literally saving the alien against the government and their own parents.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Goonies, they discover, they're taking on other adults. You know what I mean? Not that that's the message so much, but that kids have power.
Yeah.
You have your own mind, your own abilities. You know what I mean? You start to realize that a lot of those 80 movies were pretty awesome.
You think there's a generational shift that's happening or has already happened, that kids of a generation, younger than you are going to have a challenge on account of outside influences, with movies like that? You've got, enabling factors that kind of propel your kids towards the direction you're trying to create anyway. So whereas now maybe the movies are different and the perception of what a kid and parent relationship is like is more coddling.
Yes.
You want to comment
Yes.
on that?
Yeah, that's another one I have to self-check myself on all the time. So my daughter's entering middle school, and the bullying and all this starts, and you talk to other parents, and I hear other parents say, the bullying thing, you instantly want to go talk to the other parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't. I take a step back from that and say, man, bullying was something we dealt with. It's awful, whatever. You'd never want your kids to be a bully. You do everything in your power to make that. But they're going to deal with bullies in life.
Mm-hmm.
Elementary school, all through school, college, life, business, whatever, right? So instead of taking on the bully, I try to take on, here's how you act. Here's how you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Instead of, I'm going to try to make the world as soft and peaceful as I can for you,
Mm-hmm.
which again, you look at a lot of modern movies for kids, that's how they are. You know what I mean? Then you
Yeah.
look at 80s movies and it's like, nah, world's pretty freaking rough, but we're going to deal with it. You know what I
Your
mean?
mom's babysitter's dead.
Invite babies that are dead. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh shit, there's an alien we're trying to save and the federal government's trying to, ram our house down. Yeah, it's that. I take a different approach. I try to.
So what, do you recall being bullied at all, or even bullying yourself, bullying other kids?
Yeah, thankfully, I can honestly say I never bullied. Big believer on just treating everyone with kindness, and I try to do that with my kids as much as I can. You have no idea what someone else is going through, but I clearly remember being bullied. I rode a bus to school that was mainly, because of where I lived, outside of town, there was mainly high schoolers.
Yeah.
And so I clearly remember being bullied. And
How'd you manage that?
I do remember being younger and dreading the ride to school.
Yeah.
Especially, one year. And I think I kind of developed a sense of humor
Okay.
about it. Like there's different mechanisms. I guess you either retreat, go inside yourself, whatever. So I would kind of do outrageous things and, get people laughing. And over the year, that kind of softened things up a bit. And yeah, as a parent, you hope your kid never goes through that. But at the same time, I don't know if you were bullied or not, or remember
Sure.
a
Yeah.
time being
I remember
bullied.
being bullied. Yeah.
Yeah, you did come up with defenses against it, or it sucks.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about it. But then there's parts of life that suck. I
So-
don't want to minimize bullying in any way, but
Yeah. For us, the experience that we can relate on is that when we were bullied. I recall being bullied on the bus. I recall being bullied in the changing room, elementary and middle school. But we never got bullied via email or via Facebook or via social media. Do you have any experience with that, or have your kids confided in you that there are things that people say to them online that don't resonate with them in a positive way, things that are even things that could be classified as bullying? And if so, or even if not, how would you manage that if you can put yourself in a space that you could imagine that that's happening?
yeah, I have come across that with my daughter.
Yeah.
And with social media. And the way I handled it, whether it was right or wrong, I don't know, but I just said, look, here's the deal. Not everyone's going to like you.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a fact of life. We need to stop this idea that everyone needs to like you. You know what I mean? There are assholes out there.
Yeah.
And the best thing you can do is just avoid them. First off, don't get involved in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to go anywhere positive. I can promise you that. There's not a
Yeah.
lot I know in this world.
Yeah.
But like Mark Twain said, when you argue with an idiot, they drag you down to their level and beat you with experience. Okay? There's one thing I know, you're not gonna win there.
So do you feel like that's kind of absorbed into your daughter's mind, and she's kind of managed the experience in a productive way?
I think it has. I think she's those conversations of when you talk to your kids, you never know what it's going to take and what's not. But I think that one did, because she realized with her other friends that continue in that world, it's not ending well, and then they end up complaining to her about it. Well, she's already ejected herself from those conversations and that environment, and I think she's learning quickly in the real world that you're not going to fix it.
Do you feel like you've cultivated an environment of trust with your kids where they come to you when they're experiencing things, or do you feel like they might be trying to manage experiences on their own? And if so, how do you feel about that? Are you proud of them that they're trying to take something on yourself, or do you feel like you're left out because you feel like you have value to add?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of both. I think I have, and I try to constantly cultivate that environment where they can come to me with anything. The story of I'm sure we've all heard it. This guy was on the radio for a while who told his daughter that she could call him anytime. She doesn't want her getting in a car with somebody who's drinking, or when she's been drinking. I don't care where you are. I don't care what time of night it is. You call me, I will come get you. There will be no questions asked. I remember hearing this, and I was like, that's brilliant, right?
Yeah.
And then he said the first time it happened, it was 3 a.m., and she was over 2 hours away. And he gets the call, and he's like, well, shit. Well, of course, he puts his pants on and drives 2 hours away, whatever. And he said it was the most quiet 2 hour ride home. They didn't say where, he said he kept his word.
Yeah.
Never brought it up again, never got mad at her, but neither said anything to each other that 2 hour ride home. And looking back on it, he was like, that was the greatest thing he could have, done. I'm not having that conversation with him yet, thankfully, but I try to have that type of conversation. It does not matter what it is. And then I made the mistake one time of saying, you wouldn't believe the shit I've been through. Then they're like what? And I go, crap. Now I got to come up with an example. But yeah, I try to. But I know it's just a fact of life that there are other things they're dealing with, I'm sure, that they keep to themselves and deal with it on their own. At the same time, you're proud of that, and you just hope they do it well.
So being proud of that, Are there any milestones that you've experienced as a father that you're particularly proud of? Anything that, you didn't expect of yourself, where you kind of exceeded your own expectations and said, if I could just tap into that more or do that more, or I feel like the way I just behaved or the way I didn't behave, this is a moment in my kid's life that I feel like it just made a positive impact on.
Yeah, one is, I think a benefit of this area and a lot of areas is there are all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds and all kind of economic situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, they went to school the same way we went to school, with wealthy, middle class, and families not doing well financially.
Yeah.
And if you can accept all of that and be comfortable with all types of people and relate to all types of people and enjoy all types of people, then I think you're going to have a pretty good life, So the area we live in does a good job of that.
Yeah.
For us. But I think we have to, there are conversations that have come up
Mm-hmm.
with, one family they had a play date with. The family has, a broken down car in the driveway. They don't have doors in their house. It's literally curtains over the doors. And they had a birthday party for their daughter.
Yeah.
And it was very simple. There wasn't, but they've also been to our house for birthday parties. And my daughter had a conversation with me about that they don't have much.
Yeah.
It was a good opportunity to have that discussion about that, that doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
They're happy. They're a family. They have a roof over their head. What they have or don't have doesn't matter. And for her to really understand that was like, okay, great. Like that's an important one.
Yeah.
There are conversations you almost forget to have with your kids,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, things like that.
Yeah, that's an important one to have. I'd like to ask you about education, just to totally shift gears here for a second. How do you, in a world of accelerating change where things are, take a computer science degree, you're being a web developer, among other things, you can appreciate the idea that the things that you might have learned in school, probably 99% of them don't apply to what you do anymore, despite being in the same field. So what are the things that kind of go through your head when you're thinking about your 7-year-old and 11-year-old and education, public or private education, college? Like, how do you put your kids in a position to succeed in what's arguably a system that isn't keeping up with change?
So I want them to always be curious.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the biggest secret. As long as you're always curious and willing to learn. I wrote a thesis in college called the Philo Farnsworth Principle. Philo Farnsworth invented the television. He lived on a farm in the Midwest. No indication that he had any technical abilities.
Yeah.
Had no education, engineering, none of this. And he invents the TV literally in his barn.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
The patent and all that got in. It was later stolen by RCA. That's a long story, but no one knows the name Philo Farnsworth.
Sure.
That's why I call it the Philo Farnsworth Principle.
Yeah.
Same thing applies to the Wright brothers.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Again, bike shop. No engineering degree. They weren't professors. Didn't go to college. Who would think that they would solve flight that for 1,000 years man has tried to? Who would think that these two would do that? Dayton, Iowa, of all places. I'm sorry, Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But anyway, the whole idea is if you look at the people that do extraordinary things, at the end of the day, it didn't have a lot to do with where they went to school,
Mm-hmm.
where they were raised. The Philo Farnsworth principle is that most of them, believe it or not, did not come from cities or high-level educations.
Right.
It came from three things, in my mind: motivation, grit, and a curious nature.
Yeah.
If you can put those three things together, it's going to be awesome. You know?
So do you feel like as a parent you can help cultivate those things, help create a fertile environment that enhances those aspects? Maybe your idea of saying yes to as much as you can and shutting it off and being present is part of that?
Yeah, I mean, I really try to, but, you know, motivation comes from within. And grit and curiosity. I really try my best to do that by saying I don't know if they have questions, doing the research together so that they see, you know, how that part like we talked about earlier, involving them in what I'm doing, you know, the different projects. I brought my 3D printer home so they can see how I develop a certain thing from beginning to end, and then showed them how to just kind of show them, to kind of open the doors to the world a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not a big mystery, because it's easy to just say things are a mystery. Like the other day, I took apart a microwave with them because I was sitting there and using the microwave, and I was like, damn, I don't know how this thing operates, you know.
Yeah.
So I looked online, bought a used microwave, you know, and brought it home and took it apart with them, and then each time we would look at the bin and show it out. So I try, you know, to do these things, but you don't know. You don't know if, you know, it'll. And then the grit thing, the biggest one is to not be afraid of failure.
Yeah.
In a weird way, almost embrace it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
People talk about if you're going to fail, fail fast.
Yeah.
You know, everybody knows about Thomas Edison, you know, and I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just had 10,000 ways that you don't make a light bulb.
Exactly.
So do you think that that's something that's innate, or do you think that you can kind of socialize your kids into being gritty and curious?
I don't know. That's a great question. I don't know. I don't know, because, you know, you look at these people that I mean, you can pick an example out of a hat and then go read the biography and try to take clues from it. Like, you know, Philo Farnsworth's dad, for instance, he was a farmer.
Yeah.
There was no indication there. You know, Steve Jobs' dad, Bill Gates' dad was a dentist. You know, you don't really know what, how much. I guess you just try your best to show them that there's nothing wrong with being embarrassed.
So to kind of to tie it back into education, I think about a story that I'm told, to create some context. You look at the public education system. It's big brick buildings with bells that is so reminiscent of like the industrial time. It's a factory that is built on, you know, Henry Ford's principle, and it's crank everything out of this same hole. Whereas one kid, the story goes, constantly was getting out of their seat and twirling around the room, and the teacher, you know, basically diagnosed the kid as not being, you know, teachable, and that they needed to seek special treatment. Well, that child's song was dance, and they ultimately ended up becoming this incredible high-level dancer, but the environment that they were in was not supportive of that they were trying to, you know, I fear using the term, but they you know, suppressing this kid's creativity by trying to fit them all through the same hole.
Yeah.
So do you find that in educating your children that there are pluses and minuses in the systems that you've put them in, and do you feel that the parent's role is to kind of unwind some of it but encourage others, or is it to, you know, find an environment that's most supportive, you know, to allow a kid to follow their bliss? And, you know, is it to identify the bliss, or is it to listen to your kid? Like how are you educating your kids, and what are you doing to kind of monitor their experience?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great way to put it. Caveat real quick, Bill Gates' dad might have been a lawyer, but I don't remember exactly, but whatever.
Yeah.
And,
we can Google
fact checking. I wonder that all the time. So the way I look at it is, for me, one of the great things school did was socialization.
Mm-hmm.
You're around all kinds of different people, The second thing is the foundation, right? The foundation for learning, because you're going to learn all kind of different things throughout school. You get a foundation on a lot, reading, writing, the math and all that. And then the other things kind of spark things, right? Like the art classes. And plus, they are around all kinds of teachers with all kinds of different backgrounds and all kinds of interests. So we all have the teacher that could care less.
Sure.
You know what I mean? They're there to, watch the clock until the day ends, whatever. But then you have the teachers that are curious and passionate. You know what I mean? I think it takes all kinds, and that kind of gives a rounded foundation for them. And then as far as the sparks, my goal is to encourage them to follow that, whatever it is. And it could be multiple things, but,
You have to be very aware of what they're doing because they might not verbalize that to you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm going to jump into, I'm not going to call it a lightning round yet, but we'll have some quick ones. So the first thing, is there anything on your not to-do list as a father?
I can't think of anything. Like do, you mean like activity-wise?
Yeah, things, well, do like in the sense of, the way you treat your kid or the way you react to your child or, if another parent is listening, what is something that you would say as a dad, don't ever do this?
Oh, boy. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'll noodle on that for a second.
Fair enough. What kind of father do you want to be remembered as by your children?
Involved.
I think that's a wonderful answer. Is there a TV dad that you like?
Well, before recently, I would have said Bill Cosby. Well, he can still a good TV dad, I guess we can.
He was a good TV dad.
Yeah. And what's the one, the show with Michael J. Fox? Was that Family Ties?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think so.
I always liked him because
we're just barely just
I just
on the
missed
edge
you on
of
that
the-
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just barely.
I always liked him because, he's got kids that are very different,
Yeah.
and he kind of lets them be them.
Mm-hmm.
And, anyway.
Are your kids totally different?
Yeah, I'm starting to see,
Let
absolutely.
me see it.
Yeah. How
Has
about
one
you?
like you and one like your wife?
They both have pieces of us
Yeah.
that you see come out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Clayton's like me, which is,
Like how?
act first, shoot first, ask questions later type thing. And you start to realize that that's good in a lot of ways, but in some ways we got to work on that.
All right, so as a father, what's a gift that you would give to a new dad?
A physical gift?
Yeah, or, a lesson or a piece of advice or even a physical gift that a new dad might find some value in because they are totally green and are about to have that impact.
Other than a bottle of Woodford Reserve. If money was no object, this is going to sound a little bit cheesy, but a good wide chair.
Yeah.
We all should and, read to our children,
Mhm.
Look things up with them, whatever. I don't mean a couch, but if you have a comfortable chair with arms that's wide,
Yeah.
then the kids can sit on either end.
Mhm.
They can sit up on the arm, however they want to do, lean against you. That I have one of those, and that's one of the great, I think, more time spent in that one place than any other single.
That's just wonderful. So in the event that this recording lasts forever, can you think of something that you feel like your kids, you'd like to say to them that would make them a good parent, a good husband, a good brother, a good person?
Yeah, other than the big one, just take a beat before you react or speak. That's the big one I keep reminding myself of. And then the other one is let them be kids.
Awesome. What are 2 or 3 things that you think would make up a super dad?
A super dad would be, the obvious, the big one to me is, again, let them be kids. And let yourself be reminded of what it was like to be a kid.
What's an attribute of yours as a father that you're particularly proud of?
The fostering creativity.
How do you expect your role as a father of a 7-year-old and 11-year-old to evolve over the time where, they basically aren't relying on you anymore?
Yeah, my dad keeps reminding me I'm going to get dumber and dumber.
It's all relative.
You know what I mean? So, we all know that when you're a teenager, our parents know nothing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, all they're doing in life is holding you back. If they would just get out of the way and let you at the world, things would be fine. Yeah.
Okay, so
I know that didn't answer the question, but I know it's going to evolve, and it scares me because I'm just going to get dumber and dumber. And again, they're going to see me as the guy that is holding them back. That's the thing I hear a lot of parents say is the hardest thing is knowing how much rope to give them.
yeah.
That's the thing you will constantly wrestle with until they're out of the house. And I can see that, especially when they get their own cars, when they're driving. Because now you can have those conversations with your parents and other parents and know that they were scared to death every time you left the house in a car.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. 100%.
That's the part but you have to. It's the same, you have to let them go and give them rope. But damn.
There's definitely something that there's a disconnect between people who have kids and people who don't have kids. There's a level on which you just cannot relate anymore to a person that doesn't have children. And that's a great example of one that a non-parent might say they're 16, they can drive, they're responsible, whatever. Do you think you'll ever not be scared to death
Exactly.
with your kids?
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. Exactly. No.
What's the greatest hope you have for your children?
I heard John Lennon had a class project, which was to go home. He was in elementary school, go home and write down what you want to be when you grow up. And he went back to school and wrote down one word on the piece of paper, which was happy. And the teacher gave him a failing grade and said, you don't understand the assignment. And he said, you don't understand life.
It's amazing.
To me, it's just simple. Just be happy. Now, I know you're not always going to be happy. There's going to be shit days, but find a profession, a place to live, a partner that makes you happy.
So if you were to break down your life as a book into, let's say, 3 chapters, the first being before kids, the second being, having kids and the experience of raising them, and the third being them flying the nest, can you think of what those chapters might be called?
Chapter 1 be the shitstorm. Chapter 2 would be take a seat. and 3 would be hopefully hang on.
Okay, and I'll end this with a question that Tim Ferriss likes to ask at the in his podcast, which is, what message would you put on a billboard? And I mean that in the sense of what message would you give other dads, expecting dads of young people, dads of kids younger than yours, a message that, anything, for whatever reason, what do you feel like they should drive by, look at the sign, and read?
I would go back to let them be kids.
Let them be kids.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll call that a wrap. I appreciate your time.
Awesome questions.
And I hope that other dads out there get something out of this. So thanks a lot, man.
Thank you very much.